The 3 points I want to touch on here today is going to come from First Kings chapter 19. And for the backing context, we're going to go through the story of Elijah, which was a prophet in the Old Testament that was fighting against Jezebel and the prophets of Baal at the time to turn Israel back to the God that they serve. And today is going to be a little long reading, but you kind of have to understand, the whole chapter in order to truly understand, how to heal and deal with the past. And we're going to dive into that by going to First Kings chapter 19, verses 3-9. And it says here, starting that Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. And at once the angel touched him and said, get up and eat. So far in this story, Elijah is running for his life, and it turns to Queen Jezebel, and he's gotten to a point where, he feels defeated, he feels broken, and he feels like his life isn't worth living anymore. So as he sits here, the angel feeds him for the first time. And then we continue the story in verse 6, where it says that he looked around, and there his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. It says in verse 7, and the angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you. So he got up and drank and ate. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights till he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. And so here, as we go through the rest of these verses, the angel comes back to him a second time after Elijah has fell asleep to wake him up and, give him the food to journey to Mount Horeb. And the beautiful thing about this is that, Elijah decides from whatever point in time, like as he's sleeping or, while he's eating, that he wants to actually go and see God. And when you look at the word Horeb in Hebrew, it represents friendship. And when you look at Mount Hebron, like it is a very significant thing in the Bible, because that's where, most of the people that was connected with God was at. So this is where, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were buried. This is where, David went to God, while he was going through his battle with Saul. This is where Caleb, the man in the Old Testament that was going into the promised land, ended up inheriting, because he believed that Israel could conquer the land that God has given them. And so, with this being such a great place, such a significant place, it bears witness that Elijah is going here, not just because he wants to go to another location, but because he wants to actually go to God about the problems and things that he's facing. And I think that when you look at our lives, it's so interesting because, we try to deal with our past on our own for the most important case. And I know that it's something that I've done. It's something that I wanted to do because, before I reached the point where, I was ordained like as a pastor, I was going through one of the most difficult times of my life. It was a time of deep, deep isolation. It was a time of depression because, right after being ordained, I had a huge falling out like with my former church, and particularly my former pastor, because, at that point in time in my life, that was a time where I knew I was supposed to go, and, they didn't want me to leave. And a part of myself didn't want to leave either, because I've been there for so long. I was there for several years, and many of those people were just like family to me. And so, as you can imagine, it was a pretty hard process, like leaving and getting away from there. But eventually, I went and followed what the Lord said. I left the church, and, as a result, I not only fell out with some of the members that were there, but my former pastor, particularly was hurt by, me leaving, and he began to start, spreading and slandering my name in the community, telling people that, I didn't believe in church anymore. I didn't believe in ministry. And, I didn't believe I was supposed to be a minister or a pastor. So it was a really hard time. And it's not something that I really cover very often, but it's something that, at that particular time I thought was one of the worst mistakes or things that I could have did, because even though I knew I was following the Lord, I couldn't get over the hurt and the pain and just the difficulty I felt. And that ended up putting me in a place of isolation where, like Elijah, I wanted to be close to God. And so I would just spend hours and sometimes days, by myself, just talking to God and just being with him and being in that place. And I guess the point that you kind of get from my story and even Elijah to some extent is that when you're dealing with, difficult situations like this, when it looks like, everything in your life is against you or all things are going well and now they're bad, the first thing that you have to do is take those problems to God. You want to be in a place where you're sitting with him. You want to be in a place where you're praying or reading the Bible. You want to be in a place of quietness where you have the opportunity to truly hear him and the things that he's going to say, because it's through him that we're able to overcome the issues that we have. But it's